Welcome to Keys to Cabo, a podcast all about motivating and educating you in the art of luxury real estate in the Baja. I'm Isabel, luxury real estate agent with Baja Investments, a boutique agency based in Palmilla. Today, we're going to talk about the process of purchasing a property here in Los Cabos as a foreign, as most of the buyers here are from other countries. Today, we're here in Palmilla with my co-host, the famous Pato Sanchez, real estate attorney to whom I can openly recommend to each and one of my clients since I have trusted her since the beginning of my career. Can you believe it's been 3 years now?
3 years of what?
Of you and I working together.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, no, I actually know. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you for having me today. I'm very honored to share this space with you and with your clients and with your audience. And I hope I can be of assistance in answering some of the most frequently asked questions by people who are interested in purchasing real estate in Los Cabos.
Thank you for coming here today. You've been so helpful throughout these years, and I'm sure you're going to be able to help me answer the most common questions that clients ask me when they're thinking about purchasing a property here in Los Cabos. So let's start with the very basics. How can foreigners purchase a property here in Los Cabos?
My first recommendation will be to find a reputable and trustworthy sales representative, broker, sales agent. Mm-hmm. I believe it's very important for anyone who has interest in buying real estate in Los Cabos or anywhere to find someone that they can trust, that they can actually connect, and that it's going to be looking after their best interest and it's going to find the right property for them.
I would say, obviously, also a real estate attorney to work together with the agent, no?
Real estate transactions, in my opinion, have become more and more, I'm not going to use the word complicated, but let's say there is a lot of things to do when you're closing like a real estate transaction. And this has become more and more like more of a process that involves a lot of parties. And since 2014, when real estate started to be considered as a vulnerable activity according to the law to prevent money laundering, it's just more and more requirements by all the parties that have been or that are involved like in a real estate transaction. So yes, I believe that if your buyer is a foreigner, it will be highly recommended for him to hire a real estate attorney that can provide a better counsel as of how does the closing process for foreigners in Los Cabos work and the requirements, and to follow through the entire process just to get like a good advice and avoid any sort of like last minute surprises or problems.
And for those wondering if they could even purchase a property as a foreign, how is it that they can do so?
Buying real estate in Los Cabos as a foreigner, it's not like for a foreigner to buy real estate in the mainland, okay? Mexican law considers the entire peninsula of Baja as restricted area, which means that foreigners will have to acquire real estate through either the incorporation of a Mexican trust with a Mexican trust bank, or they might consider to incorporate a Mexican company to be able like to purchase a real estate in Los Cabos.
Just to be clear, because I think everyone knows the Mexican trust more as fideicomiso. It's the same thing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the Spanish translation of Mexican trust is fideicomiso.
All right. And what would you say are the most common legal mistakes purchasers make when they do their first investment here in Cabo?
Do things that they will never ever do in their original country. It's interesting, but I run into clients that come to Mexico, and I do not know if they drink too many margaritas, but they suddenly start doing things that they will never do like in their places where they're original from. Suddenly they say, I gave someone like a $20,000 deposit in cash. And I asked, did you have something signed? It's like, no, but so I think that's the most common mistake. I believe that any buyer that comes to Mexico and specifically to Los Cabos and is interested in purchasing real estate needs to reach the right people needs to be well advised and needs to have as much information as possible available for them to make an educated decision. And I believe that's kind of your work, like, and mine, like, to be able, like, to provide that information from a real estate point of view. What's the best property available for the client, depending on what are his needs and what are his expectations. And for me as an attorney, to better advise him on what would be the best legal structure for him to set up either the Mexican fideicomiso or Mexican trust, or if the case is to incorporate like a Mexican company and purchase the property through the Mexican company.
I think one question that you do very well when you first meet my clients is like, what is the purpose of their investment, right? So like right now it makes me think of, if these clients have an LLC back in the US, would you usually recommend they buy through the LLC or as an individual? What would the differences be between these two?
In my opinion, it's very important for me to find out from the client what's the purpose of him purchasing the real estate in Cabo. Is he buying the property for his personal and his family's personal use? Is he buying the property as an investment? Does he want to generate rental income from the property that he's purchasing? All of these are questions that I like to get answers from the client so I can better advise him. Because if he's thinking that he wants to purchase a property for his personal use, then I will recommend him to set up the Mexican trust, having him as the beneficiary within the Mexican trust. But if he tells me that the only purpose for the purchase is as an investment and he really wants to generate rental income, then I might recommend him to set up the Mexican trust, having an entity, that U.S. entity as a beneficiary, to create like a layer of protection between the Mexican entity owning Cabo and the rest of the property that he owns, like in his country of origin.
And for those, like you mentioned, for those interested in investing for short-term rental income, is there something they should consider before jumping into it? Like maybe the taxes or...
Yes, I think there is a lot of things that they need to consider. Not only of course, the taxes, but to begin with, what will be their legal obligations as someone who's a foreigner, owning real estate in Mexico and generated an income, which will also bring like obligations and rights in Mexico before the Mexican tax authorities and in general, according to Mexican law. So I will advise for them also not only to reach out to an attorney that can better explain, but also like to get counsel from an accountant or a tax expert that can fully explain what are the implications, not only in Mexico for that income, but also how is that income going to be taken back like to their countries of origin, if it's going to be taxable here and it's going to be also taxable over there. For example, there is a treaty between Mexico and the US and Mexico and Canada to avoid double taxation, which means that whatever tax the owner pays here in Mexico will be deductible, or he can offset it from the tax to be paid in his country of origin if Mexico and the country of origin are part of this treaty to avoid like double taxation.
I think that's a super common question, so thank you for answering that to everyone. For someone that's ready to move forward with the purchase, how long would this process be?
It depends. If we need to set up from zero the trust, the Mexican trust, the fideicomiso, or if there is already a trust established by the seller, and we're just going to move forward with an assignment of beneficiary rights. So and it also depends on if it's the second option and there is already a trust in place, who is the trust bank, okay?
Some banks take longer than...
Yes, absolutely. Okay. We have some trust banks here in Cabo that are very efficient and very quick within their processes. And we also have some trust banks here that have to send everything to Mexico City to be authorized there. So that might take longer. And we have others that you have literally to go and, grab a torta and a fruitsy and wait for them outside their offices because there's only one person like for the entire like trust division, and it takes forever like to get them like to get back to you.
Can you mention some of the fast and quick banks you would recommend?
I think that we all know who are those, but let's say that usually the closing process takes somewhere between 45 to 60 days with a regular bank, although there are a couple of banks here in Cabo right now that you can easily close in less than 30 days, okay? So there are many parties that are involved in the closing transaction. I think you really need to get yourself like a good team to make it happen as quick as possible, but always with certainty and legal securities for the clients.
And maybe to be on the safe part, maybe more like 60 to 90 days is what we heard the most, no? Like it's the usual.
I would recommend to set up like a timeline to say like from 45 to 60 days with always allowing an extension to the parties if something is needed. Because again, there are third parties that are involved, and sometimes neither the buyer or the seller or their counsels control their timelines. We have municipal authorities that need to issue documents, state authorities that need to issue documents. So, and these times sometimes are totally out of the hands of the parties like to control.
And for those who think that even 45 to 60 days, it's a long time, are there any alternatives? Like maybe they could try to take early possession?
Okay, well, I know.
How like often do you recommend to do that or not?
I understand that some of our buyers are like in a hurry to get into the property. And I think that early occupancy or early possession might be an option, but you have to be 100% sure that it's just a matter of time, and there's nothing that's going to come in between the closing process and the time that your buyer takes like early occupancy of the property, because then you're stuck with a buyer with no title and a seller that has like probably 70 or 80% of the purchase price already in his pocket. So it is an option. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's becoming like a very common and very much used like option more and more. I'll just say that it needs to be properly instrumented, and both parties need to be fully aware of what are the consequences of going into an early occupancy or early possession agreement.
And for those who have never heard about this, I'm just gonna explain real quick that they can take early possession as long as they've put 100% in escrow, and you've recommended me to release 70% once they take the day they take the early possession and leave 30% in escrow until the actual closing. Can you explain why this 30%?
Well, I wouldn't specifically mention like percentages, but for sure, I would like to, as if I am representing the buyer, I would like to make sure that the monies that are left in escrow cover enough to pay for seller's capital gain tax, seller's sales commission, although I know like sales agents are not going to be like crazy happy with me for saying that, but I believe that, the sales agents are kind of like responsible for taking, their clients like to the goal line, like which means the closing before the notary. And I know they're eager, to get paid and get all of this, but I think like they kind of share these, so they need to kind of be also paid, with the rest of the closing, with the actual closing. So I say, leave the sales commissions and enough money, enough funds to pay for seller expenses such as capital gain tax in escrow, and then release, the rest to the seller in exchange for early occupancy of the property with the proper documentation like to back it up.
And for, to finish with the purchasing side of real estate here in Los Cabos, what's one advice that you would recommend buyers before they sign the contract? Like, it makes me think of considering the dollar to peso exchange, which they might have not even think about because all the prices here in Cabo, they're in dollars, right? But we're still in Mexico, so.
Well, I mean, that's a great comment, and I'm just going to go back a little bit. It's about the purchase price. Everything in Cabo is in US dollars, and most of the transactions are agree in US dollars and will be paid by the buyers in US dollars. But for tax purposes and for closing purposes, the law established that the final purchase price will have to be expressed in Mexican pesos in the final document, in the final deed to be signed before the notary public. So that's very important because sometimes the buyers are not aware of this. And when you deliver to them their closing costs, they have to pay a 3% acquisition tax that's going to be based in the purchase price to be expressed in pesos. And then when they sell in the future, they'll have to also, estimate their capital gain tax based on the purchase price
in pesos.
When they purchase in pesos and when they sell in pesos. So yes, exchange rate is important. It's important to be aware of that, well in advance, just as it's important for them to be aware in advance of their closing cost and the entire process and the taxes that they'll have to pay at closing, along with other costs that are, related to the purchase process.
And right now that you just mentioned the closing cost, can you tell us what the percentage is around of the total purchase price? Usually
it goes somewhere between 4 to 4.2% of the total purchase price of the property. It depends if the buyer decides to close through, the Mexican trust. And if within the Mexican trust, if he decides to do it through an entity or through the U.S. trust, because there are some other costs that are associated, like Spanish certified translations, apostilles, notarizations. But it's important also to mention that out of that 4.2%, 3% is the acquisition tax that needs to be paid through the Mexican notary that closes the transaction to the municipal authorities when the deed is recorded before the land office.
And do the buyers need to be here in Cabo when they're going to sign the purchase agreement at the notary? Or
No. We have that question asked a lot. They're like, hey, can you send me my deed and DocuSign and I'll sign it and then we're close. As much as I wish we could, the documents that are to be signed before the notary in Mexico need to be signed wet ink signature, meaning in person. If the buyers are not going to be here for their closing, they can always grant a power of attorney either in their place, of origin where they live, or they can grant that power of attorney here when they are, looking at the properties. Limited power of attorney, that's very important.
Yes,
it's a limit for the specific use of, purchasing this property or incorporating a Mexican trust and purchasing the property and that's it. So they do not have to come to Cabo for their closing. They can assign either their sales agent, their closing attorney, their real estate attorney, as their power of attorney. So that person will be the one appearing before the notary at closing to sign on their behalf the final documents.
And right now that you mentioned that, it makes me think that they should probably choose one attorney for many transactions, right? They can use it to purchase and they can use him to sell it as well whenever they choose to sell the property, right?
Well, if it's a limited power of attorney, it's usually only to sell the property or to acquire the property, and the power of attorney will be extinct once it serves its purpose. But I mean, I have clients that I've been working with for 16, 18 years now. And I have powers of attorney for them, for their assets, the assets that they own, in Cabo. So whenever they are hey, I'm selling or I'm buying, I can sign on their behalf any documents here in Cabo without them having to come here.
Okay, and right now let's go to the selling side and answer some of the questions that clients may have when they're thinking of selling. What do you think it should be the most important thing they should consider before they even think of listing the property?
Capital gain taxes.
Yes. So have your real estate attorney sent you a capital gain tax estimate before they even think of a selling price, right?
I think that's step number one. If you're planning to sell your property, the best thing that you can do is ask your sales agent to put together for you a capital gain tax study, saying, so you are fully aware how much you are actually going to net in your pocket after the sale happens, which is basically what are going to be the seller cost, capital gain tax, which is 35% of the gain after deductions, authorized deductions, the sales commission that the seller is going to pay to his sales agent.
Yeah, whatever they agree.
Whatever they agree. And, you know, any other like expenses related, like if there's going to be a power of attorney to be granted, if there's going to be a ratification of the letter of instructions to the trust bank, all these things are, you know, could be small expenses, but still expenses. So I'd say like the biggest one will be the capital gain tax. And just make sure that the seller has all the documents that need to be filed before the notary for the deductions, the authorized deductions, which are basically the acquisition tax that he paid when he purchased the property, any improvements that have been duly recorded with Mexican invoices that can be presented to the notary for him to do the deductions, the notary fee that he paid when he purchased, and the sales commission to be paid to his sales agent when we close. Those are the authorized deductions that will be taken off from the base before estimating seller's capital gain tax.
I think another way that sellers have been usually using is not deducting, but allocating an amount to furniture when they purchase like a pre-sale without furniture, but they are now selling with the furniture. So how often do you see this happening, that sellers allocate an amount for furniture so they decrease their capital gain tax?
It's something that we see more often and often because of capital gain taxes being like higher as prices are really high in Cabo, well, in Mexico and in Cabo especially. So yes, and I believe the parties need to understand that this allocation towards furniture, it's not something, it's absolutely arbitrary. It's not like, oh, $300,000 is actually, you know, the purchase price or the price of the furniture that it's in the property. It's more like a tool for negotiation between the parties, knowing that the purchaser is not going to be able like to use that amount that's going to be allocated as part of his base when he sells in the future. And for the seller to know that that amount that's going to be allocated towards purchase price of furniture is not going to be part of his base to estimate his capital gain tax. So it's more like I see it more as a tool for negotiating, you know.
Yeah, for each specific sale. Like, yeah. Pato, thank you so much for coming today. And I think we answered most of the common and basic questions that buyers have. I know we will see each other again, because if you have any other questions, please send it to us by email. And I'm going to have Pato come here again so we can answer them all.
My pleasure, Isa. Again, I'm very happy, and I do need to say this. I am very proud of this one because she's a rock star. So if you're really looking for someone to help you finding the right property for you in Los Cabos, I highly recommend Isa. She's my girl.
Thank you very much. I think the same of you. We can work together in your next purchase in Los Cabos. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Isa.
Thank you. Ahí le cortan. For someone who moved... yeah. Ay, whatever. Todavía falta buen. Huh? Pato, thank you so much for answering. Pato. Ya, se me traba todo. Pato. Ay, qué bonito.